This land was made for you and me.
Welcome to this latest edition of the Cranky Curmudgeon's Corner. My name is Paul Thomas, and this session we are going to be talking about capitalism and our future. Joining in the discussion, Doug Heinrichs, Thaddeus Paul Hamas, and Marilee Rendulich. Welcome, panel. Let's head to the left coast, Marilee, where Silicon Valley now seems to be in control of capitalism's operating system. I don't even know how to lay the foundation for this question other than to ask, does Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft have around our necks any other reality than we are doomed? It seems like they have a lot of control, Marilee, over all our lives. And what they're after is more money as well. Or do you see it a different way?
I necessarily feel personally threatened. I had a lot of technological difficulties today, though. And so I do feel very insecure. You want to talk about insecurities? Technological insecurity is one of mine. It's quite frightening. But when you look at today's workforce, they give up on it. They give up on all this technology. It's absolutely how they live and breathe. And for people like me who had to learn it midstream, and cannot keep up with the Joneses when it comes to that, it's a whole nother ballgame. I find Google and Apple to not be as threatening to me as much as, say, Amazon, because it's tapped into, it has so much control over so many small individual businesses and how they do business, but yet these businesses have to be on Amazon. And so I find that very, very threatening because it can control how they operate. I don't see it as much in Google and Apple and Microsoft because I never did buy into the Bill Gates vaccination stuff. So I think they're mostly our big operating engines, although they're probably able to buy up any competitive threats very easily. If, any startups that are threatening to their technological powerhouse.
Okay, Thaddeus, do you feel threatened by these big tech dominant entities?
Well, I'm not feeling a personal threat right at this moment, but it has bothered me that these guys have, as you both said, they buy up the little guys. Well, wasn't that illegal at one time? I'm just saying that this whole thing with all of those enormous and enormously influential corporations are, I'd say, one great big epic win for the deregulation frenzy that's gone on for the last 50 years.
Yeah.
And that's about all I know about it.
What do you think, Doug? Are you look at this whole thing as something that scares you or not?
Yeah. Again, I don't feel threatened today particularly, but I think looking at where it's going, I think there is a real danger because I think this has moved from being just an ancillary part of life to becoming essential, and it's taking on much of the quality of being a utility, so that we need it. It's like heat and water, and so that the power to really starve us out, so to speak, becomes really, really great. We become tremendously dependent on these things. You can't do anything without using these things. I had the very sobering experience this past. I took 2 college courses at the University of Maryland. Old people can do that cheaply if you don't take for credit. So it was great fun. But I'm sitting in class with a bunch of 19-year-olds, and everything I had to do required working through the computer. I couldn't sign up for the classes. I couldn't do everything was online. And I found myself going to these kids saying, how do I do this? They just do it very automatically. So, but it just reminded me how essential it's become to just doing anything. And so it changes. I mean, at that point, they do have the same kind of power a utility has. And that's where the issue of regulation. I mean, I think you can't afford to not regulate businesses that provide vital services for the population. These are not optional things where we can say, no, I'm not going to do it. I don't like that, or I don't like their policy. I'm not going to buy their product. We're forced to work with these things. And so I think they become, in that sense, very dangerous. And I share with Thaddeus the concern that we've, as a society and as a government, we've abdicated our obligation to put some regulations on corporations. I think it's really out of hand. Because the nature of capitalism is the winners get bigger and the losers disappear. I mean, that's sort of unfettered capitalism. That's how it goes, right? So the only correction is if you have some kind of government limits on that process. And I think we have moved so far to abdicating that. And that's what, to me, is very scary.
And what's another reason for that abdication is that you have in Congress all these old people that don't know shit about the technology and are just afraid to look at it because they don't know anything about it.
That's part of it. The biggest part of it, of course, is who donates to their campaigns, right? So if you have, Google can do a lot of lobbying, and money talks in our system.
Please explain your understanding of how Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency works. Doug? Any idea?
No, number one. But what I do suspect is it represents the reduction to the absurd of the gambling nature of Wall Street. There's no product there at all. They're just gambling about it. I mean, as far as one can tell, it's an arbitrary entity assigned arbitrary values, and there's a gambling game going on. And I have no idea what it is, but it just seems to me like it's a shell game. That's all. I know nothing.
Okay, Marilee, do you have any idea what it is?
No, and I really did try to find it.
Did you buy some Bitcoin at some point?
After all my research, somebody trying to get me to join the club. Maybe all of you got one too. I'm not sure, but it's kind of like ethereal money. It's like a new form of money without a banking system. But it started at $500 a Bitcoin in 2016, and now it's like today 67,000. I don't know what that means, and I don't know. Can you buy commodities with it? What do you do with it? I just don't understand. So I have nothing to contribute to this question. I'm sorry.
I didn't think anybody would, but I thought I'd ask anyway. Thaddeus, Doug thinks it's a casino. What do you know about it? Anything?
Well, I'm going to make this a unanimous committee by saying it's a mystery to me. And as I do with most mysteries and occult practices like voodoo and black magic, I try to keep my hands out of it. The only logical possibility that I can see is that this is a gigantic pyramid scheme or some other form of con game.
Con game sounds right to me. Okay, back to where we were talking about that. This was asking about regulation. The Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890 was designed to prevent monopolies and any attempt to restrict competition. It was reinforced in 1914 with the Clayton Antitrust and Federal Trade Commission Acts. The only example of enforcement I am aware of was the breakup of AT&T, which was initiated when DOJ filed a suit in 1974. But it took another 10 years for the baby bells to finally manifest. Since then, monopoly control has gone in a different direction with mergers and takeovers in oil production, airline travel, tech, broadcast, and entertainment industries. Our Cranky platform here is on YouTube, which alone is a huge entity that happens to be entirely owned by Google. Is this trend of, quote, too big to fail end quote, corporate behemoths sucking up most, if not all, the competition? Is it a pattern that should concern us, the global consumer? Thaddeus, are you worried about this lack of regulation and these monopolies that seem to be growing and growing and growing?
I've been saying for years that eventually the goal of the Fortune 500 will have been to fold itself into the Fortune 5. It is worrisome because big corporations don't have a very good track record with caring for their customers. So, yeah, I said I put it in the pluperfect subjunctive to say that we're pretty much scrawed.
You worried about that, Doug?
Yeah, no, I agree with Thaddeus. I think it's careening at a rapid rate. I think we've lost, and with corporations having an international dimension, it's quickly getting to where it's very difficult, even if any government had the will to control this thing, to do it. They're larger than life, and I think they have become the dominant force in the modern world. And I think it's going to be very hard to change that because we don't have much voice with them. I mean, they don't really care what we think. And as frustrating it is to think that our government doesn't listen to us very well, I think corporations listen even less. And so, yeah, I think it's a very ominous pattern.
Sounds pretty scary, Marilee. You scared as these other guys?
I'm not as scared. One of the issues, when you're looking at Google and Apple, they grew at such an exponential speed compared to like the baby bells, the telephone system. And I think most people didn't know how to get a handle on it. I'm particularly threatened by them because of what they do. I don't see how they can fail because of what they manage universally, which is our internet systems and all those services. There are massive job losses at times, and that certainly affects segments of our society. But overall, I don't look at them the same way I look at AIG, or Bank of America. I don't know that our economic wealth is completely encapsulated by them. Can they take over and control it like an evil, monolith? Perhaps, but I don't feel like that's the path or the intention or anywhere.
Well,
it's going.
AIG and Bank of America kind of followed that same pattern as far as takeovers. Bank of America took over Merrill Lynch. AIG managed to take a big hold of the insurance. So are you saying then that AIG and the Bank of America, or the way they operate, is scarier than these big tech monopolies?
No, more in the class of too big to fail because of all the wealth that they carry. But I don't look at Google and Apple in quite that same. I don't think that, because they don't hold all of our wealth,
Right.
But they have power. They have technological power that could be frightening. But I don't feel that they're using it in that manner.
Okay.
In a detrimental manner, I guess.
Yeah, the influence of the capitalist mindset into government policy making is an interesting phenomenon. When the latest polls show most Americans trust Trump's handling of the economy more than Biden's. The last year of the Trump administration was 2020, which was easily designated as the worst economic year since the Great Depression of the 1930s. There are two questions here. First, describe the conditioning that takes place in the minds of people who believe that Trump was good for the economy. And second, is there danger posed by the influence of corporate business interest into government policy? Marilee, I'm going to ask you first. Does the idea that people think that Trump is good for the economy. Please explain that to me.
And this is impossible. It's that basic mindset that because somebody is wealthy and certainly in our voting blocks, and this is not just Trump. If somebody's a businessman, they seem to think they know more about running government. And I think we've seen that over and over again through the decades. And, to elect some lunatic like Trump because he claims to be a successful businessman, regardless of how many people he's hurt over the years or his bankruptcies, all of the above. None of it mattered. So to me, that is, again, just how we value that wealth, the wealthy individual. And I don't think it has any bearing on common sense, any relationship with common sense or good sense.
Okay, the second part of the question, do you feel there's a danger in the influence of corporate business interests in the making of government policy?
Absolutely. I think lobbying is probably one of the biggest businesses out there. And I don't even know how you find out how much they control our government officials.
Well, Citizens United, we don't even have the ability to do that.
It's
dark
crazy.
Money is dominating.
Menendez, what's his name? Menendez,
yes. Gold bars. Yeah. All right,
so lobbying, I think, is a real big problem. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I will be very happy to lay the first question at the feet of the Ministry of Nazi Propaganda. Oh, I mean Fox News, because there are so many Americans who depend entirely on that corporation for all of their information about what's going on in the world. So if they think, if they are conditioned to think that Trump is their man for the economy, it's because they have, for the last decade at least, been fire hosed with propaganda telling them that he's the greatest genius that ever walked the earth. And on the second question, of course, corporations are a threat, but it's just because of their raison d'etre. They exist to make profit, as much profit as possible. That is job number 1 through 10. Caring for their customers or their constituents or any kind of ordinary people is, if it is on their radar at all, it's very, very low on their list of things to do. So having a whole lot of power basically over us is not good for us, because the people who have power over us in this way aren't thinking about us at all. They do not care what happens to the people on Main Street.
Doug, psychological conditioning because of the propaganda that is being thrown at them?
So I think there is a lot of that, but I also think, and I agree with Mary Lee on this, I think the biggest thing is this value system we have, which says that rich people are better, that they're brighter, they're more intelligent, they're more insightful, they know what to do, so that there's this sense that they should be running things. They're an elite. And I think it's a deeply ingrained viewpoint. And then I think a lot of people have the view that running a government is exactly like running a corporation. It's a big organization, you deal as if those are synonymous. And of course, the goals of those organizations are radically different. As Thaddeus says, a corporation exists for one goal, to make money. Government should be there for our benefit. It's an entirely different frame of reference. So I think the making those parallel, which is, I think, what happens. I'm a successful businessman, therefore I can manage this government and make it, get everybody doing their job and boom, boom, boom. The other thing, though, with respect specifically to Trump and Biden, uh, I really do think the issue of inflation is a serious problem for Biden. Because when you say, how's the economy doing? There's so many different ways of measuring how the economy's doing. The problem is, if you're looking at unemployment, let's say, and unemployment's 4% and you make it 8% by your policies, 4% of the population feel the pinch. Inflation, everybody feels the pinch. It may not to a greater degree. Every time we go to the grocery store, every person sees their prices going up. They can buy less, they can buy less. So when you look at how many voters are being impacted by inflation versus how many voters are being impacted by unemployment, now the impact on the unemployed guy is catastrophic. But when it comes to going to the polls, there are a lot more people who are going to be struck by their grocery bill than by an abstract number like what's the unemployment rate. So I think in addition to all these other things we're talking about, there's a very concrete problem that Biden's got, that inflation's been high. Yeah, now, I don't blame Biden for that. I mean, one of the ironies in American politics, it seems to me, is historically, the economy has been the most important issue in who wins elections. And it's probably the piece a president has the least control over of all the other things they control. What happens to the economy is controlled by factors, worldwide factors, that the president has very little capacity to influence, right? He can maybe soften the landing if we're heading down. He can, there are a few things, but it's minimal. And yet people put it at the feet of the president, whatever's going on, good or bad.
Artificial intelligence, AI, is here to stay. It has already changed the landscape of academia and hugely affected many other industries. My major concern is that the mission behind its growth and proliferation is the same we experience throughout: make more money by any means. AI has no conscience or moral restrictions. The ease in which it can lie is staggering. Writing lies goes way back to the first 5 books Moses wrote in organizing his national structure and continues to this day. What are your concerns regarding how the marriage of AI and capitalism will influence our future? Doug, what do you think about AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some real concerns there, but I also don't see AI as intrinsically evil. It's a tool. I mean, it can do wonderful things, it can do terrible things. And I think what has characterized human history is our tools have become more powerful, and our moral compass and how we use our tools hasn't improved one iota. So you can look in any area. We've always fought wars. It used to be we pulled our swords out and fought each other. Now we throw nuclear weapons around, right? So the means have gotten more powerful. We haven't gotten any smarter in using them. And I think it's the same thing here. AI is a very powerful tool. I mean, we have found creative ways as a species to lie for a long time and mislead one another long before AI. But this kind of ups the ante. It's a much more powerful technique. Now, it has some absolutely potentially miraculous applications. Some of the things being done in medicine with artificial intelligence and allowing tissue diagnoses in a way no, living pathologist could do. I mean, there are lots of things that can be very wonderful, but it's a very powerful tool. And I think your point is that, it's in the hands of companies who, are not there to serve our best interests. They're there to generate as much income as they can. And also, I think we have an unscrupulous political system, so I think it's going to get used to sway people even more outrageously than they've been swayed in the past. So, yeah, I think it's got some very negative potential just because we haven't gotten any wiser in how to generate a good society.
Marilee, I think the unscrupulous political system that Doug had referenced is what scares me the most about AI. You have any other fears beyond that?
Well, I think we can all reflect back on hell and the danger, he possessed. But I have not had that much encounter with AI that I am aware of. And so I'm not feeling personally, threatened by it. I don't watch Fox, which I think has been, like, Paul recently pointed out, lying continuously for 10 years. So it's up to us, to really delve into what we're going to accept as a society. Job replacement, I think, is a big potential for it. And that could be a restructuring of our society too, ultimately, if it continues in that direction. There are so many positives from it, but how we really manage it as a society, I think, is what really will determine if it's going to be wonderful or perilous for us overall.
So we should be able to identify the con man coming at us, whether it's a human being or an AI con man. It's still up to us to identify that and prevent that from being prevent ourselves from being taken by.
Yeah, I mean, we can have some government interaction, but I at this point, I don't even know how that's done. I don't understand the depth and the breadth of artificial intelligence. It's so vast, and I don't know where all the pitfalls are. But I know it's growing at an exponential speed, and I guess we're all going to be exposed on many different levels soon enough. But hopefully we can get a corner on it.
Yeah, we have to keep our eyes open. Thaddeus, are your eyes open to AI?
My eyes are semi-open to it, pretty much in the same way as what we were gnawing our nails about last week, which was cyber threats. But the two of them as threats, and I'm not saying that everything about AI is threatening, but the threatening side of them worries me in the same way. And that is that they became very quickly exponentially more sophisticated and harder to detect. It's harder and harder to detect what is artificial intelligence and what is an actual, person talking to you. So, it's a worry. It's not a new worry. It's just a new form, a new technology that is growing faster than we can keep up with it. And that's, that's the same with, I think, all technology has grown, has accelerated its maturity to the point where, I don't think there's any one person who really can keep up with all of them.
Yeah, you think about computers in 1980 and what they've become here in 2024. That was only 45 years. So,
yeah.
Last question, climate change. As the transition from fossil fuel energy production and consumption moves into renewable sources such as wind, solar, and hydro, there have been some evident feet dragging from the oil, coal, and natural gas industries. Even though the job creation from the renewable industries is far outpacing the jobs left in the fossil fuel industries. So, why the foot dragging? My opinion is that the captains controlling these industries aren't concerned about jobs as much as they care about the quarterly profit margins and stockholder dividends. Selling coal, oil, and natural gas is way more profitable extraction than what can be charged from free sources such as the sun, wind, and gravity running water through the hydro turbines. The good news is that astute business owners who need to buy energy products understand that cheaper energy from renewable sources makes better business sense than buying the more expensive fossil fuels. That's my take. What's yours? Thaddeus, is that the way you see how the thing is laid out in the future?
Well, let's see. I want to admire your optimism on this. And I think that I've been seeing some motion in the same direction, that people are moving towards businesses are moving towards renewables at a faster rate than they were. But at the same time, the fossil fuel industry, I think, is becoming more aggressive in its pursuit of new markets, of reversal of environmental and business regulations, public subsidies, and of course, a disinformation campaign to throw shade on renewables. I'm sure you've all seen ads saying, the sun doesn't shine all the time and the wind doesn't blow all the time. So how can we possibly survive on renewables? Well, that sort of thing is going to go on. But at best, I could call that the industry's early death rattle. But the same titans have known full well and longer than we have that something had and has to give. It was galling for me to hear a couple of years ago that the lab people at Exxon predicted over 50 years ago the things that are happening around the world in climate change right now, because they refused to disclose their findings, and I accuse them of that. What snows me about it is that awash in money, as they all are, they haven't had the foresight to go all in for environmentally sound energy sources, knowing what they know and what they knew a half century ago. If they had disclosed that back then, I think they could be cleaning up on renewables by now. The progress that we would be making towards environmental safety would be decades more advanced than it is. And their leaders would be being hailed as heroes.
But isn't it because they can't make as much money from renewables as they can? Isn't that why?
Because they've got blinders on and all they can see is their quarterly bottom lines. And that is the ultimate short-sightedness. And it's a short-sightedness that I think endangers the survival of our species.
Marilee, I think I'm right about both things, that they're reluctant to give it up because they make more money selling gas and oil and coal, and that businesses are liking renewables because it's cheaper than coal, oil, and natural gas. Do you agree with that?
I do. And I think, it is like with any industry. I mean, if you think of our steel industry in Pittsburgh and how we had to transition, how that transitioned out and how long it took Pittsburgh to restructure itself, we know what's going to happen with the coal industry. The gas industry, maybe not anywhere near as quickly. And there's certainly been changes in the drilling, and I know they're doing a lot more drilling in the United States, et cetera. So I think it has some sustainability. By the same token, I just put solar up. And I'm loving it because it shows, every day I look at my little app and I'm 4% dependent, on the grid. That's going to change come summer, but I'm hoping that I'll survive summer in a cooler environment. But at the end of the day, I know that's going to change. They're going to have to start coming at us solar panel people for money because the power companies aren't going to survive. So one of my reasonings for putting it up is that we know we all have to go to electric vehicles in the near future. And so I'm looking at that as, my next vehicle purchase. But when you think about what it takes to build an electric vehicle, how many resources, natural and otherwise, are required just for one cell, for an electric vehicle? It's almost as bad on our climate as it's drilling for natural resources. And now there's a new problem with solar panels and getting, as they lose, they become big waste problems once they become ineffective or they're no longer to standards. So I don't know that we really know what we're trading for as we try to change climate change or reduce its impact. I think there's still a lot of problems with our thinking.
Okay, Doug, wrap us up.
Okay, I think I agree with what's been said so far in this topic, but I think your point's the main one. It's quarterly profits. I mean, the only way the change to renewable energy makes sense is as a long-term project. In the long run, it makes all the sense in the world, even from a business vantage. In the short run, it doesn't make sense. For one thing, the technology, as we've just been talking, is not perfected. I mean, there's a lot that has to happen before it becomes really effective. We have to have ways of generating batteries that aren't using, causing all the mining and resource utilization. I mean, what do we do with the solar panels? I mean, there's a whole host. The technology is comparatively in its infancy compared to drilling for oil. But I think the real big thing is, CEOs of corporations are answerable to shareholders. Shareholders are interested in quarterly profits. And this is a long-term investment to do. And I think it's very hard to get big corporations to go for that in the face of the pressure from their investors who don't give a damn about the product or the company. They just want to make money this quarter. And I think that creates a real problem. The only way to partially offset it is our government incentives to make it, in the short run, more profitable to do renewable energy. That's a political hot potato, as we know. And whether that's going to happen more is going to depend a lot on who wins this next election, for instance, right?
Right.
But this is, again, one of the places government can step in the interest of the people and say, we're going to incentivize, even though in the short run it may not make maximum profits, we're going to give you short-term benefits so that you do this because it's good for us all in the long run. Will our government have the courage to do that? I don't know.
I kind of doubt it.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I have my doubts.
Thank you, panel. Doug, Marilee, Thaddeus. Appreciate your joining this discussion. And all you out there in Cyberland, thanks for listening. Until next time, bye now.